up today. Christ Almighty, help me find a way. I went outside, California, condors flocking by. In 100 days, there's 100 me's. In an hour, 60 of me beat each other for supremacy. And I don't mind advancing time. I'm just inhabiting these atoms. They were never really mine. Alright.
If the topic is change, I'm the perfect example of change.
I won a prize, three-wheel plastic, named denote and size. I moved away, right on Elm Street, left on MLK. In 100 years, there's just one me. In an hour, 60 of the other me's have 60 me's apiece. And I'm fine, looking at the sky and just imagining these atoms in me being throughout time. Alright.
Everything changed because of me moving to the Edisto and then starting this project and then getting involved in this issue. So yeah, I feel qualified to talk on the subject of change. I'm Hugo Crispin. I'm a filmmaker and I live here on the North Fork of the Edisto River. I moved out here in about 2005, and in probably 2008 I started thinking that I wanted to make a documentary film about the Edisto. I started doing pre-production in 2012, and in 2013 I began with a simple idea. I was going to paddle the entire Edisto top to bottom in the course of a single calendar year and document that process. It didn't stay simple though. Expedition number 3 was the biggest one so far. Joe and I were joined by Scott, who, for some inexplicable reason, decided that in spite of the Expedition 1 experience, he was willing to come back for more, and Mark, who was paddling with us for the first time and had no reason to expect anything but a pleasant Sunday afternoon on the river. Temperatures were in the mid-60s when we put on. It was about 1:30 in the afternoon, and we had 7 miles of river to cover before we got to the takeout. Sunset was at about 5:45. Luckily, neither of them noticed the giant spiders. That trailer gives a pretty good idea of what the initial idea was, and it ended up being very limited. I shot a lot of material in 2013. A lot of it you'll be seeing in the course of what we're showing today. I thought a lot about how water gets in the river. So one of the things I shot was rain. By the end of 2013, I really began to feel like the movie needed something to tie it all together. And that's when fate took a hand and change stepped in. When the Walther Brothers Potato Farm began to build its water withdrawal point on the South Fork of the Edisto was the point at which the community began to realize what was happening here on the South Fork, and a lot of people became very concerned.
For right now, we've got 2,000 acres here, and then another 1,200 acres that we're working on putting irrigation on down the road. But we grow potatoes on a 3-year rotation. So if we have 3,000 acres, for example, in total, that allows us to do 1,000 acres per season. Potatoes take around 14, 15 inches of water per year. It depends on the year. Every year will be different. Depending on rainfall, some years we'll only apply a couple inches, some years we'll apply 15 inches if on a really dry year. It just depends. The regulation in Carolina is pretty loose as far as drilling wells or anything because of the abundance of water we have here. It's not regulated at this point. Well, you have to register your wells or register, any water withdrawal you do out of a surface water source. In DHEC or in RCS, they'll tell you, whether or not they'll allow you to do that. So they're monitoring what's happening and making sure that you're not going to suck an aquifer dry or suck a stream or a river dry.
A lot of the initial upset about what was happening really came from lack of information. Nobody knew that this was going to be done. There was no requirement under the law for there to be any kind of public notice or public hearing. And it just, one day they had bulldozers on the side of the river, and people freaked out.
Come talking about that handmade.
I talk a little philosophy and about evolution's hold on me. I know a little theology, but I'm also into sorcery. If we talk a little more about what we thought, a little more about the things that can't be bought.
One of the things that I really didn't expect from this project was I ended up getting to know people in Wagner, South Carolina, my neighbors. It was transformational. All of a sudden, it wasn't just me and the river, it was us and the river. And that made a real difference. In 2014, American Rivers decided to list the Edisto, the South Fork of the Edisto, as one of the 10 most endangered rivers in the country. And as part of that, I was asked to do a video to accompany the listing. And when you watch that video, it becomes very obvious that the community in Wagner had become very much a part of the story for me.
It never rolled around in a week's time that we were not in the river at least 3 to 4 times a week. And every Saturday, my daddy worked at the Ford Motor Company in Williston, and every Saturday at 12 o'clock when he got off, when he got home, by 1:30 we was in the river until dark. Hearing the old owls just holler and hoot at night, and my daddy would say, "The catfish are gonna bite tonight. You hear them owls?"
I cannot remember when I wasn't in the river. My first recollections of the river is when my Uncle Wayne took me probably at the age of 6 or 7 years old. I had 2 older cousins that we fished. He would take us in the river, and I thought it was the wildest, most mystical place I had ever seen in my life.
Hunter is the 4th generation to fish actually the Edisto River. How long have you been fishing the Edisto River, Hunter?
Since I was 3 years old.
We take an annual river trip down the Edisto River all the way to Edisto Beach Marina.
Well, when you're small coming up as a child, that river seemed like the biggest thing in the world. And the older you get, the smaller the river gets.
Animals need the water, we need the water, and nature needs the water.
We're on the South Fork of the Edisto River. Had hunting club down here, enjoying the river with the young'uns, fishing and taking advantage of the water while we still have some.
It's just a long, free-flowing Blackwater River that has been preserved for hundreds of years. And as stewards, we need to continue to allow all people to enjoy the river, but we have to make sure that we use it properly so it doesn't deplete itself.
In December of 2013, this rural waterway began to attract attention after the first registration of an agricultural water withdrawal under the newly enacted South Carolina Surface Water Withdrawal Act was approved by the state's Department of Health and Environmental Control. In Aiken County, a potato farm received approval of a plan to withdraw billions of gallons annually from the South Fork of the Edisto. This first registration provided ample evidence that, while well-intentioned, the existing law has a number of deficiencies. There is no public notice given, nor are public hearings held on agricultural water withdrawal registrations. Approval is based solely on DHEC's safe yield analysis, depending on a dubious mean annual average calculation that has no relationship to actual flow at any given time. No consideration is given to analyzing potential environmental impacts, and there is no provision for input from any other regulatory agencies. Finally, once approved, the registration is never subject to review and exists in perpetuity.
I mean, for a couple of dollars in a registration, you can pump all the water you want out the river, basically, the way the law is written out.
One of the first people I really got to know well in Wagner was Doug Busby. And when you see one of the early interviews I did with Doug, it becomes clear why he has been such a powerful and passionate spokesperson on behalf of the Edisto and the rest of the rivers in South Carolina. You know that there's groups like the Farm Bureau and the Agriculture Department and so forth. They're going to say, well, that Doug Busby, he's just a tree-hugging son of a He doesn't know what's up. Why do you hate farmers in America, Doug?
The very farmers I don't hate. My son is an agricultural education major, and I'm proud of him. And I'm proud he chose agriculture. I come from a family of farmers. My people are Furticks. They come straight off the farm. My daddy was a farmer till he tried, in the 70s, he came off of it because the land was so poor that we could not make a living. But he was farming up until then. We came off the farm. I love the farmers, and I would never do anything to hurt a South Carolina farmer. They are my people. They are my blood. They are the backbone of many of small communities and small towns all across this state. And they're the ones that ought to be the maddest about this.
Lobbyists denied it, there's no way to hide it. The divided states of America, tied in every area. I'm getting kinda scared of you. The divided states of America.
It's kind of ironic, but just at the point where the Walther Brothers situation was getting solved by their compromise with Friends of the Edisto to settle the lawsuit that was going on, at the very moment where it seemed like our attempt to draw attention to this issue was going to lose momentum was when the Farm Bureau of South Carolina stepped forward and put out attack ads claiming that people who wanted to change the surface water law were radical environmental extremists. And ironically enough, at a moment when it really felt like our natural momentum was beginning to subside, Farm Bureau brought it all back to a boil.
And what you have is you have an industry that has a free ride to get as much of the public's water as they want, and they want to keep it that way. And I'm one of the most conservative Republicans you'll find in this legislature, but yet I'm being called a radical environmentalist because I want a permitting regime implemented at least at some point, at some level of use.
Apply for a permit and suck that Edisto River dry, and nobody downriver have any recourse. To me, it's got to be one of the most insane laws I've ever heard about.
Well, with the surface water, I guess I'm concerned about the river going dry. I don't really want to see that happen.
I am a farmer. As long as with being a businessman, that's where I made my livelihood primarily, and I'm for farming 100%, but not at the detriment of our water and especially the South Edisto River.
You can't be screwing the person next to you as far as how much water they're going to get, because you may affect the other farmer, other friends and family and people that want to enjoy the waterways.
You know, people that's been on that river for hundreds of years, one company comes in and they trump everybody that's been here forever.
I believe that most farmers feel the way that I do. I could be wrong, but I don't think anybody wants to see a river dried up. Nobody wants to see a stream go dry. We've grown up believing that surface water is there for the people of South Carolina.
We own that. And the idea that, well, we can just give it away to a private entity to do anything they want to with it, pump as much of it as they want to with no check, no regulation, nothing, it's insane. It's crazy.
We've got a magical situation in South Carolina. Hopefully South Carolina is too smart to just throw it all away for some short-term profits for a few corporations.
Farm Bureau has taken a stance that, it's a public statement that the people that were raising the questions are radical conservationists.
I was a member of the Farm Bureau for a long time. I'm not a member now because of this, because they called me a radical. And they called a group of us radical. It wasn't just me, I was in the group. And I think the gentleman that called me a radical, I don't think he understood really what he was talking about.
I can't even ask a question with concern about my water without being labeled a radical.
Yeah, that hurt my feelings. And that hurt a lot of us feelings because that was a long way from the truth. And we are for farming, we are farmers.
I understand that Farm Bureau is against the change in the law. I am a Farm Bureau member, I am a farmer, I am a South Carolina voter and a citizen, and a water enthusiast, and I drink water every day. But does that mean that it should be free-for-all for everyone? I don't think so.
It's about maintaining the water level, I don't understand Farm Bureau's position.
And South Carolina has a long history of conservation. This has always been a Teddy Roosevelt Republican conservation ethic in this state. And it's been wonderful. Public, private have done so much to create the Ace Basin. We're part of the Ace Basin. Where do they get off saying, screw the Ace Basin, we need the water?
I don't think that this is something that can wait. I think this is something that needs to be taken head on as soon as possible, and I'm hoping that that's now.
Go, young sinner, spread the message. Armageddon looms. Heaven calls her choir of angels. Better change your tune. Heed my word, lest lose salvation. Faithful perish man.
My name is Doug Busby, and I stand before you today representing farmers, business people, and the conservation community across South Carolina. You have great concerns about the current surface water law and its detrimental effects on South Carolina rivers and ultimately its citizens. Until the winter of 2013, I never really thought of myself as a conservationist. I hunted, I fished, I loved the outdoors. I tried to be good stewards of what the Lord had entrusted to us, but I just never saw the need to join a group and cause a fuss.
We really never meant to become activists. I certainly never meant to become an activist. It just sort of happened. With the initial surface water registration by Walther Farms, we started a Facebook page called Edisto Concerns. After the legislative effort in 2014 sort of petered out, we started doing a podcast about the Edisto, which we call the Edisto TV Podcast. And we started a website for Edisto TV as part of that, and a Facebook page for Edisto TV. And then in December of 2014, the folks from the South Carolina Conservation Coalition asked us if we would attend their summit over near Aiken in early December, and we did that. And out of that coalition conference, we started a group with a lot of the people in the Conservation Coalition that we ended up calling South Carolina Rivers Forever, and another website, southcarolinariversforever.org. And our focus began to really expand from just the Edisto to all the rivers of South Carolina, because it became clear that if we were going to effectively address the issue, we were going to have statewide input and statewide support to get that done.
We, the leadership of South Carolina Agriculture and Forestry, said, what will it take to grow this industry to be even more impactful to South Carolina?
The problem I'm having is that our elected officials are soliciting these farmers from out of state.
If you have looser laws in an area where a large farmer from another state can come in and basically exploit the situation, I think that'll happen. I believe that's certainly possible. I mean, we've seen that happen here before.
My fear is that some of the people we got coming in now, it's all about a dollar, and that when they can't make a dollar anymore, they'll move and they'll go somewhere else.
Have you been out west recruiting farms?
I've been a lot of places as your commissioner. Last night I was in Mullins. I was recruiting there. No, I have been visiting with farms who've shown interest in South Carolina, those who bring the prospects of processing our farm products. We've had farmers come and look at South Carolina for all the fact that we are a business-friendly state.
Come down here and take our water. Just come give it to us. Oh, give it to us, because we got plenty of water. Well, we won't have plenty of water. They're finding that out in Wisconsin. They're finding it out in Michigan. They're finding it out around the Great Lakes about how hard it is to deal with water. They've screwed up all of California with the water. So come here, come to South Carolina.
I can see all the irrigation going in. I can just see the pipes. I can just see water being drawn out that river, and I guess I was one of the first to even think about it. What could happen? Because I talked with others right quick and found out a lot of people felt the same way I did.
That somebody could come here, never been in the state of South Carolina before, as far as we're aware, and could suck the bulk of the water out the Edisto River and have priority, and it's forever.
I can't see any future for it if big farmers start pulling out of there even more so than they are now. Unless some kind of regulation is put in place to control that, this looks pretty bleak.
Citizens from every walk of life all over South Carolina are coming together in a unified grassroots effort called SC Rivers Forever to support change in the current surface water law. We have an unusual opportunity to get ahead of the curve and learn from the states that are in crisis right now. California is facing water regulations right now. The problem is they just don't have any water to regulate. We still do.
It's like driving down the middle of the road with no hands on the wheel. And I keep hearing stories about the guy who's killed while he prayed. You should go ahead and say it, 'cause we're all gonna die anyway. Stage up.
Working on this project has made me think a lot about truth. because obviously I'm shooting and editing the movie, so I'm showing you my version of the truth. And to the best of my knowledge, everything I've shown you and told you here is true. But nobody has a franchise on the truth with capital letters. It just doesn't exist, and everybody's side of the story, I think, contains an element of truth. So when everybody's well-intentioned and everybody's telling the truth, the time has come to compromise. And they say a good compromise leaves everybody dissatisfied. So maybe we're headed in that direction.
But the world's gonna do what the world's gonna do at the end of the day.
Well, I was born and raised in Orangeburg, South Carolina, which sits nicely on the banks of the North Edisto. And it really introduced me to the natural world because we would go into the swamps of the Edisto. We would fish in the river with my father at first and then by myself later.
But all our serious fishing and what have you was along the South Edisto River from probably Coleman's Bridge all the way to the Big Edisto and all the way down to Jacksonboro, that area. South Edisto is the prime for me, though. That's the best river in my opinion. I can be there in 10 minutes and must be preserved.
I live on Edisto Island on a tidal creek. And the tidal creek is flushed with fresh water from the North Edisto River. What forms Edisto Island is the Edisto River. When it flows down from the middle part of the state, it flows through the Ace Basin. The Ace Basin is a tidal basin where 3 rivers feed.
The Ashepoo, the Combahee, and the Edisto River, thus ACE. Those 3 river systems go into St. Helena Sound.
Those 3 rivers create truly a wetlands wonderland, a literal paradise for wildlife.
Everything comes down the Edisto is going to be in here. It's going to affect salinity. It's going to affect it all. And I don't want to see it. None of us want to see it trashed. I mean, we've all got a huge investment in this.
The flow of fresh water from the Edisto River is the lifeblood of Edisto Island, and really of the whole coast.
The Edisto, is touted as being the longest blackwater river in the country, and we need to protect it and watch it very closely.
South Carolina took a big important step a few years ago in passing a law that would permit surface water withdrawals. Unfortunately, when that law was passed, there was an exemption given to agricultural users that now puts every South Carolina river at risk of being run dry because the water is being over-allocated.
The Edisto and Salkehatchie regions are the canaries in the coal mine. We are seeing unrestrained development of giant out-of-state farms using both surface water and groundwater.
We have a law in which one class of user has a complete exemption and can use as much water as they choose without the requirement of receiving a permit.
We all want to protect South Carolina farmers. They're a vital part of our communities. But what it did was open the door for large agribusiness to come in and do this. Not family farms, but giant industrial farms.
If it happens on the bank of the Edisto, it can happen anywhere in the state, from the Salkehatchie to the PD to the Black River, to Lynch's, to the Waccamaw, to the Savannah, right on any river in the state.